If you live somewhere like the States, there's probably a pretty good chance that you've never seen a traditional ad for Sony Xperia. You may have seen some videos online, but I'm pretty sure the majority of these don't necessarily always paint Xperia in a very good light. I've been using the highest end Xperia models for the past 4 years, and so I think there's a couple things that you really need to think about before you consider switching to Xperia. The first and maybe most apparent reason is Xperia's unique 21:9 form factor. This makes Xperia devices taller and slimmer than most other devices on the market. The slimness makes the larger one line easier to hold and maneuver with one hand, but can also lead to some funky sizing when dealing with certain apps such as TikTok. This also means that typical 16:9 YouTube content will fill less of the screen as a whole, but 21:9 videos will look amazing, taking full advantage of your entire screen. Another key difference with Xperia is how Sony approaches mobile photography. While most other brands have their focus on things like HDR and software improvements, Sony tends to focus more on hardware in the process of shooting itself. A key criticism of Sony Xperia is that they're unable to keep up in terms of photos with the modern competition. It is important to note that at the end of the day, a lot of this modern software processing does come down to personal opinion, but I am definitely going to state my case for Xperia since we're here. In comparison to most other brands, Sony does not push HDR as far. In my opinion, I actually kind of prefer this as I'm not a huge fan of the typical over HDR look of a lot of modern brands. Most brands apply much heavier photo processing to images than Xperia does. This can lead to sharper appearing photos in certain scenarios, but again, I'm not really a fan of this. I recently had someone try to argue against one of my photos, saying that their pixel shot blew mine out of the water, but upon even a little closer looking, we can see the difference in approach between the two, and in the end, I prefer the approach that Sony takes. Aside from photo processing, the actual way of shooting on Xperia is much more enjoyable in my opinion. The native pro shooting apps are quite fun and comfortable to shoot with, and they get better with each passing year. There have also been some really good upgrades in terms of video recording, with 4K 120 available on all 3 of the rear cameras on the One Mark V, and I feel pretty confident including some shots from the One 5 from the main camera and mixing them in as well with my A7 IV shots. Sony Xperias are also one of the few remaining flagships to still offer the headphone jack and micro SD card expansion. This is great for a myriad of reasons, from being able to cheaply expand storage to easily being able to use wired headphones and mics. One major point where Sony does fall incredibly short of the competition is in terms of OS updates and security updates. So while Sony offers 2 years of current OS updates, so for example, starting on Android 13 and going to Android 15, most of the competition at this point is up to 4, 5, even 6 years. And so if that is a major point for you, do be aware of that and keep that in mind. If it's not super important to you, then honestly, it's not that big of a deal. One other point of controversy is the launch price of these devices. Sony Xperias are often super expensive, and compared to equivalent device in terms of other brands, they're typically quite a bit higher. With that being said, you can usually find them a lot cheaper after a couple months, meaning that if you can find a really good deal for a couple hundred to even up to $300 or $400 off, it can make a really good deal. So there we go. I think these are some of the most important things to think about, just in case you are considering jumping ship and buying an Xperia as your next device. If there's something else that I missed that you think is super important, be sure to drop a comment down below, let me know what it is. And if you're interested in seeing some photography with the Xperia One line, be sure to check out my playlist where I do some POV street photography. Otherwise, thanks for watching, and I will see you all on the next one.